Day one of the New York Giants New York Jets joint practice is in the books, and we'll talk about what we've learned coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. And we thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Football season is around the corner, so go on and visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. All right, Giant fans, on today's Locked On Giants podcast, the Giants and Jets held the first of two joint practices over in Florham Park, the Jets headquarters. So we're going to kick things off by talking about some of the things we learned, all right, some observations that I saw. Now, disclaimer, when the Giants and Jets practice, they were on two different fields. So I mainly focused on the Giants offense versus the Jets defense. I do have some takeaways from the Giants defense versus the Jets offense, courtesy of Brandon Olson, who was helping me out with the coverage. So I'll touch a little bit on that. And then later on in the practice, the two teams got together on one field to work on red zone drills. So I'll have some stuff for you on that. Then we'll talk about individual standouts in segment 2, who stood out and why, and maybe, some other things that kind of caught my eye for one reason or another. And then in segment 3, I'm sorry, guys, we have to talk about some of these injuries because there's some that, in my estimation, that are starting to become a concern. So we'll talk about those because we can't ignore them. They're not going anywhere, unfortunately. I wish they were, but we got to talk about them and the impact that they will have on this Giants team. So that is our schedule of topics for today on Locked On Giants. Again, welcome on into everybody. All right, let's get into it. All right, Giants, Jets. Now, the Giants offense, in my opinion, had a shaky type of day. The one-on-ones, the Giants offensive lineman versus the Jets defensive lineman, I thought for the most part, the Giants won that one. I was very encouraged by that because obviously you want to see your offensive linemen win those one-on-ones. So there were maybe a couple of exceptions here and there. Maybe, like, for example, James Hudson split his 2 reps with different guys. But for the most part, the Giants offensive line won the one-on-ones versus the Jets defense. Now, the 7-on-7s that the two teams ran. Again, I thought the Giants were sharp. They were completing passes. They were moving the ball. All's well, right? Then we get to the 11-on-11 or the team drills. That's where things started to fall apart a little bit because all of a sudden the Giants couldn't move the ball for anything. Now, they had some success in the flats and on swing passes, but anything in the middle of the field or deep down the field, nothing doing. So that was a little concerning there. And at one point, it was interesting. At one point, when Jameis Winston went into the drills, he basically pulled all the guys together after a series of passes that just didn't go anywhere. And I think he was trying to, get them to settle down and focus and kind of, guys, come on, we can do this, sort of like a rah-rah cheerleader type deal. But that was across the board as far as the Giants' struggles on 11-on-11 for those early drills. So that was a little disheartening. Now, again, I wasn't over to see the Giants defense versus the Jets offense, but I stayed in touch with Brandon. And then, I could also kind of see if I'm in between, I would look over with the binoculars and see what was going on there. What I can tell you is in the beginning, like the early parts of the 11-on-11, there were a lot of loud cheers. So that meant, since it was a Jets crowd, that the Giants were giving up big plays. So at one point, I believe Justin Fields, the Jets starting quarterback, went 5 of 5 to start off a team drill segment or an 11-on-11 segment. All right. Not good. Not good at all because, look, I know the Giants were missing a few guys, but they were moving the ball, the Jets, and they were making the Giants the Giants defense look foolish. And, talking with Brandon about what he was seeing on the other side on that side of the field, he was like, it just looked like they were disorganized, and especially in the back end of the defense where they were missing some guys, which we'll talk about, later on in the show. And it just looked like, they were disorganized in the back end of the defense. Now, for what it's worth, Corey Black, Drew Phillips, Trey Hawkins III, they didn't practice. They were all dealing with injuries. And also Cordell Flott didn't practice as well. So basically, you now had a situation where the Giants were actually rotating in O'Donnell Fortune and Art Green in with the ones. Art Green working at cornerback, slot cornerback. O'Donnell Fortune kind of competing, if you will, with Deonte Banks. So I'm going to talk about injuries later in the show, but the thinness at cornerback right now is a little bit of a concern for me. Not going to lie. Hopefully Drew Phillips gets back and some of these other guys get back, and, Cordell Flott, but right now that's probably my biggest concern is the Giants cornerback group. All right, let's talk about some positives. Okay, let's shift away from the negatives here. The run defense was very good. All right, this is from Brandon. Brandon told me that the run defense was very good. And he said basically the one play that kind of was alarming, went for a big, gain. Braylon Allen of the Jets somehow managed a long run against Kayvon Thibodeau's side. But that being said, two guys that stood out in the run defense, rookie Darius Alexander was an absolute, plugger. Elijah Chapman was also very good in the run defense. And again, comparing notes with Brandon for our report over on New York Giants on SI, the linebackers didn't have a whole lot to do in the run defense early on. So that's what you like to see. You like to see your defensive front be active and stop the running game. So that was a positive for sure. I mentioned that the Giants offense was flustered deep down the field by the Jets defense. Something to keep an eye on. Do they fix that in day 2, which will be at East Rutherford? We'll see on that. But yeah, the big concern again, the Giants cornerback group. I just feel like something's just not, that they don't have enough there. So look, if the back end of the defense can't hold its coverage, then what good is having this beast of a pass rush that this team has? So that's something to watch in these last 2 preseason games. It's something to watch when the Giants and the Jets go on the field for the second joint practice. So I'll be watching, because I think what I'm going to do is, having watched the Giants offense versus the Jets defense, I think I'm going to flip it and watch tomorrow. I'm going to watch the Giants defense versus the Jets offense. All right, coming up next, more standouts. Who stood out? What were some of the alignments we saw? I'll have that for you right after this. Hey, Giant fans, August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champion before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the defensive rookie of the year if you're feeling good about Giants outside linebacker Abdul Carter running away with the honors. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And again, coming up, we're going to have a day two recap of the Giants-Jets joint practice, which is on Wednesday in East Rutherford. So I'll be there. Brandon will be there as well. We'll compare notes. So this way I can give you the most information that I can. Mike Sando of The Athletic is going to be on with me. I believe that's going to be on Thursday or Friday show. It's going to be, we're taping Thursday, so I think that's going to be Friday's show. And we still have plenty of stuff to cover here on the Locked On Giants podcast, including a preseason game, Giants and Jets, on Saturday night. All right, let's get back to day one of the Giants-Jets joint practice. Some takeaways, individually speaking. All right, and also some alignment things that I saw. Folks, said it before, and I'm going to say it again. Abdul Carter is a beast. This young man is going to be a headache for opposing offensive coordinators. Against the Jets, and this is courtesy of Brandon, who sent me his notes, Abdul Carter was living in the Jets' backfield, right? He had a couple of sacks and at least one pressure on one specific series that he was in on. This kid's going to be a problem. And it's interesting because after the practice was over, Jets head coach Aaron Glenn was talking about Abdul Carter. He's going to be a problem. I am so glad the Giants got him because imagine having to go against him, if a division opponent had gotten him, and imagine having to go against him twice a year. But Giants got themselves a good one. And it's kind of interesting because Brian Burns also had a very good practice today. Brian Burns had his couple of sacks. He had a pressure. He too was living in the backfield. And look, I'm not saying that the Giants have any intention right now of getting rid of Kayvon Thibodeau. But my biggest concern, or if I had to take a guess, Thibodeau is going to chase the money when his contract is up. I don't necessarily know if he's going to get the type of money he's looking for from the Giants. I haven't gone that far ahead in the salary cap, but does it make sense to pay him a big amount of money? You've got Burns on a big amount of money, and then you're going to have Carter you're going to eventually have to pay a big amount of money. And I know pass rushers don't grow on trees, but I'm curious to see what happens down the line. And if down at some point it becomes Burns and Carter. And again, I want to make it clear. I don't want to necessarily see them get rid of Thibodeau. I think Thibodeau has his strengths, but you just wonder down the line if maybe that's what's in store. Okay, an interesting alignment. It's not something new, something we haven't seen before. But they did quite a bit of this, I think, because of Drew Phillips' injury. They had Dane Belton playing down in the slot. Now, at Iowa, Dane Belton was a safety/hybrid linebacker. So this is nothing really new for him. And, with Drew Phillips out, the Giants used a lot of three safeties. So that could be something to keep an eye on, especially if Drew Phillips' injury, which we don't know exactly what it is. We think it's a shoulder, but we don't know that for sure because Brian Dable won't tell us. But that's something to keep an eye on. If Drew Phillips has to miss any kind of time, will they play more three safety? They did in this particular practice against the Jets. So that's something to watch. Just swinging back now to the offense, which I was watching. The Giants offense versus the Jets defense. Jackson Dart, what can I say about him? The kid has poise. He was getting a few times he was harassed by the Jets pass rush, kept his cool, fired off darts. As the practices went on, the Giants offense got better, and Jackson Dart was making plays. He was also making plays with his legs, and just, he's looking more and more comfortable in that offense with each passing day. Now, for those wondering, yes, Jackson Dart split the second team reps with Jameis Winston. That does not necessarily mean that there is a competition right now for quarterback 2. All that means, folks, is that, okay, the way the reps are usually distributed in practice, you have the starting quarterback gets the lion's share, the backup gets the next biggest amount, the third string guy gets the next biggest amount, and then the fourth string guy gets the fewest. So they kind of know what Jameis Winston can do. They don't yet know all of what Jackson Dart could do. So that is probably why we are seeing a lot of Jackson Dart with the 2s. All right, so it's not necessarily a competition at this point. Now, is there a scenario where maybe Jackson Dart passes Jameis Winston on the depth chart? Absolutely. I've talked about that before. I could see that happening later in the year. But right now, it's not a competition. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just getting Jackson Dart as much work as possible. Because look, if the plan is for him to sit for most of, if not all of the upcoming year, get him as much work now so that come next year, he's not starting all over again. So that's what I believe they are trying to do with Jackson Dart. And it's really, not a bad plan. Now, for those of you who say, well, why are they wasting snaps on Tommy DeVito? The answer is simple. Number one, they kind of know what Tommy DeVito can do. He's the longest tenured quarterback in this offense. But they want to keep him sharp because, again, if there is a chance to maybe move one of the quarterbacks in a trade, whether it be Winston, which I don't think they will do, or DeVito, got to keep them sharp. Got to put some film out there to entice a potential trade partner, because I firmly believe that if they cut DeVito, which I think is the direction it's headed, then, some team's going to pick him up. He's shown he can win in the NFL. And if you can get something for him, anything, a day 3, a 7th round pick, why wouldn't you at least try? I know some of you will say, they're not going to get anything for DeVito. You don't know that. You don't know that. So you got to keep an open mind when it comes to this stuff. And I think that's why they're helping DeVito out by giving him some snaps, letting him put some tape out there, letting him stay sharp so that if he does get picked up somewhere, the Giants can maybe get a decent, return on an investment if somebody should want to trade for him. All right, Giant fans, coming up next, I hate to do this, but we got to talk about some of these injuries and why they're starting to become a little bit of a concern as far as I'm concerned. That's right after this. This episode of Locked On Giants is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, I'm going to be playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. Whether you're all in on something new or you like sticking to head-to-head leagues or jumping into public leagues, Yahoo has you covered. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout the month of August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team each week gets eliminated until there is one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now is the perfect time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And I saved this segment for last because it's not the greatest segment I want to talk about, but we've got to talk about it. And that's the injuries that this Giants team has and why they're starting to become a little bit of a concern. I'm going to start with Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors, as we all know, had the toe issue that they were managing in the springtime, missed the entire spring because they didn't want to put pounding on that foot while that toe healed. Then Neighbors was back. He practiced a little bit, got dinged up a little bit on a block with the shoulder, but that, as I understand, is fine. But Malik Neighbors hasn't practiced since. This was the concern I expressed a few shows ago with Malik Neighbors, that yes, they're trying to manage him, but it just seems like now if the toe is indeed the issue here, and again, I want to stress that Brian Dable did not confirm if it was the toe. He's not talking about injuries. But if that is the issue, what's going to happen when come the regular season, Neighbors starts putting real pounding on that toe? Is he going to be limited? Is snaps going to be cut down? What's going to happen? And look, I get it. I get, if you don't have to have surgery, if the doctor says, well, surgery is an option, but we can maybe manage it, fine. You're going to go for the conservative approach all day, every day. But this is an ongoing issue now, it seems, if it is indeed the toe. And let me tell you something. This team without Malik Neighbors in the offense, pedestrian. So we'll see if the Giants' medical plan for Neighbors does him any good. There's nothing to be, I guess, gained by playing him in the preseason, but you want to have some snaps for him just to make sure, especially when you're trying to build up chemistry with Russell Wilson. We saw them starting to build that chemistry, and then it came to a crashing halt when Neighbors had to step out of the lineup. And if he doesn't practice on Wednesday, it will be, I want to say, a week now. So hopefully it won't be a long-term issue. I'm not going to lie, though. I've got concerns about it. I'm hoping that the Giants can get Malik Neighbors through this season without that toe, again, assuming that's what the issue is, becoming a problem. All right. Other injuries worth talking about here. I mentioned Drew Phillips. I think Drew Phillips has a shoulder. Again, Dable did not confirm anything, wouldn't talk about it, but just based on the tape from the last game, it looked like maybe the shoulder got nicked up a little bit. Phillips had a shoulder issue last year. Something to keep an eye on. Jaylen Hyatt and Evan Neal. Those two guys haven't been practicing either. Jaylen Hyatt has dealt with some tightness in the calf area. Starting to get a little concerned about him. He had such a good spring. Then he was shut down because of the calf issue. Came back, practiced in the summer, and he's been sporadically practicing since. And what's that old saying? You can't make the club from the tub? Starting to be concerned about that kid because this tightness that he's feeling, I don't know if it's just because he's not stretching properly, the lack of hits, whatever it is, but that's a concern. And it's an opportunity that's just flying out the window for him. Same thing with Evan Neal. Now, Evan Neal, he was really coming on at guard, I thought. He was doing pretty well. And the fact now that he can't get into games because he developed this injury, whatever it is, the day before or the last practice before the preseason opener last week, that's a concern. So, that's kind of opened the door for Jay Kubas to get some snaps with Greg Van Roten, for Aaron Stinney to get some snaps in there as well. But really, Evan Neal is, and again, injuries are not a guy's fault, but Evan Neal's missing out on a golden opportunity. Because if not with the Giants, if he puts good tape out there, good game tape out there, he could still get a nice payday somewhere. If he could show he could be the next Mekhi Becton. Well, nobody knows if he can because you got to get out there. And the fact that he's not out there, that is a concern. One last concern I'll mention, and look, we still have a month to go before week 1. But it's starting to get late early for Andrew Thomas, the left tackle. Now, I believe the plan for Thomas was to maybe activate him off a PUP after the preseason finale. Because, look, he's not going to play in the preseason finale. And next week, for what it's worth, the Giants have a short turnaround before they have before they host the Patriots for the finale. So I could see a scenario where the goal with Andrew Thomas has to be to activate him after that preseason finale. Because, look, that's when roster cuts have to be made. So you're either going to put Andrew Thomas on the roster or you're going to leave him on PUP, and he's going to be gone for 6 weeks. But my concern here with Andrew Thomas and where he's at what point does he get into football shape? Now, a few shows ago, and also on New York Giants on SI, I wrote an article about an injury study that was done by the National Library of Medicine. And they did a study based on guys who don't play in the preseason versus guys who do. And how does that correlate to the injury rate for soft tissue injuries the first 4 weeks of the season? And it was found that guys that don't get a whole lot in terms of preseason snaps deal with more soft tissue issues in the first 4 weeks of the season. I don't have to tell you guys and gals, the Giants cannot be without Andrew Thomas. They need him in that lineup. No disrespect to James Hudson III, who's been playing left tackle. They need Andrew Thomas. So, again, I think what the Giants are going to do is activate Andrew Thomas after the preseason game against the Patriots when they have to, again, because of the roster cut down date. But how are they going to get him into football shape? Because they're not going to tackle. I don't know how many practices they're going to have with pads on. That's something to keep an eye on. Knock on wood that when Andrew Thomas does come back, he doesn't have any soft tissue issues, because that would not be good for this Giants team. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. As always, I want to thank you for spending part of your day with us here at Locked On Giants, or if you made us your first listen of the day, we thank you for that as well. For your next listen, do check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rodgers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, Giant fans, I'll be back tomorrow with another wrap up, if you will, from the second joint practice between the Giants and the Jets, that one at East Rutherford. I'll have that for you as soon as I can. So until then, have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow.